Oh my goodness. Hello, you damsels in delight. Even you, you handsome man, you are a damsel in delight. Welcome to the podcast. Today's podcast. Ooh, oh my goodness. So good. So exciting. I'm hoping to make this like a bit of like a series. I don't know. Let's see if Nikki and some friends are up for it. But today's podcast is a continuation, but also just the Reddit stories of a podcast that I had with Nikki last week. You are going to want to go listen to that podcast. That podcast episode that we did was so dynamic, was so powerful. Nikki really opened up her heart and shared so much, and I just know it's going to blow y'all away. Like, we talked about like culture and connection and so many things that I'm just so glad to have Nikki and her wisdom on. Like, this is a professional connector, y'all. If y'all want to see how a professional connector is, like, go listen to the episode, and then come back to this one, because this episode is so golden. We are talking a bunch of different angles, bunch of different things about queer friendship in the Reddit stories today. It's just the Reddit stories. So stay tuned for a great time. And I'm gonna say part one of this because we're gonna try to have Nikki come back, right? It's gonna be great. But for those of you that are little rebels and you're like, I'll just listen to that podcast after this one. Give me the Reddit stories, Joel. For those of you, to tell you a little bit about Nikki, Nikki is the host of the podcast. Can I just say, she is a founder of a really special project that's up and coming. But yeah, go check out her socials. Her podcast also has so much. She's been doing it for 5 years, and it's such a well done podcast, y'all. And Nikki describes in the last episode that we had together, like how she really became a professional connector through doing this, which I just think goes so well with the topic of social fitness on its own. If you're like, social fitness, girl, what? One thing that I think all of us are going to have to be mindful of these days is our social fitness, because it can be really easy to fall into an avoidant feedback loop of avoiding people, and how that can increase social anxiety, increase social perfectionism, but also decrease the meaningful connection that you have, as well as hurt your ability to recharge because you have a lack of meaningful conversations and connections and they're just shallow. It can hurt your ability to recharge with connection. So, social fitness is really important. It's something I'm going to be talking more and more about. But I think on last week's episode, you can really hear her talk about how just connecting with people really strengthened her social fitness muscles. And so, y'all, like, I really can't say it enough. Go check out how a professional connector connects. That being said, let's dive into these Reddit stories. Ooh, they're juicy, they are fire. The conversation is so good, and I'm so excited for y'all to hear it. Let's dive in. Um, I also want to get your feedback on some Reddit stories that I found, Nikki, that I'm really excited to share with you. But I know I said this to you before we were recording, but I also just think, speaking of like vulnerability and connection and being open, like to be open with y'all, the audience, I really was thinking about this quite a bit because I wanted to have an episode about queer friendship and to have conversations about that. But I was also like, oh man, Nikki would provide such great insight on this. And I was really trying to be like, but I also don't want her to feel tokenized. And because so I think too, definitely go listen to the other conversation that Nikki and I have had, because it was so good, so in depth about meaningful connection. And I'm really excited to dive into some of these stories and just get more of your feedback. And hopefully, too, this allows some of y'all out there to also feel more seen and heard. And I appreciate Nikki for giving her feedback on these stories.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I love to just kind of see what people are asking about or trying to understand about themselves and their relationships and lives. And I think it's very validating as somebody who gets to observe and respond, because I don't know that people on Reddit expect some of the responses that you're able to give. And there's something
Yeah.
really fulfilling. And I've had people come back and be like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I'm writing that in my journal. Thank you. And I'm like, "Ah, yeah, that's great. That makes me feel so good." And I was just sitting here going, I have life experience that's going to help you in some way, maybe if you care. And then you get other people who are just straight up like, I don't care about your opinion. You can just shove off. And you're like, okay, well, I tried.
Right. Right. Yeah, you were saying earlier, what was the word you called it? It made me
Oh,
laugh. You were like,
A Reddit vigilante.
yes, I love
That's
that.
what I feel like. I really do. I had no idea it was going to be so satisfying when I started.
Yeah, so good. So good. I love Reddit so much too. I love also doing these stories, y'all, because I think it's so different. It's one thing to hear us talk about these concepts and to even for me to nerd out on one of these episodes. That's why they're so damn long, right? Where I'm just like, hey, and this thing and this study and this psychological concept. But it's so different to hear it in a story, and it's so much more moving, and the emotional memory, it really helps it sink it in for y'all. So I'm gonna start with the stories. I normally have them on the computer. I'm gonna do them on my phone today just because I kerfuffled the last time I did this. So we're gonna start with this story about it's from r/ relationship advice, and it's titled I 27 male don't want to hang out with my trans friend 25 female anymore. What do I do? And then so what a title, right? If anybody is feeling activated by this, you can feel free to skip it. I did read ahead at these stories, and spoiler, it's not as bad as you think. So there's that. But use your discretion. So a little backstory. I moved into a new country. I moved to a new country a little over a year ago, and this is when I met my friend Kara. We became good friends very quickly, and I appreciated the fact that she was a friend in a new place where I knew no one. A year from meeting her, we have gotten closer. Kara is a trans woman who had begun the process of transitioning almost a year before I met her, but she was still very new to the lifestyle, her words, not mine, when I met her. Because of this, a lot of things we spoke about initially in our friendship were very centered around her transition and the first steps to an openly queer life. She admitted there weren't a lot of people she could speak about this with, and she enjoyed finally having someone to hear her out. While I was genuinely oop, While I genuinely enjoyed learning about Kara's point of view and her experience as a trans woman, I also encouraged her to share other things with me, such as her taste in music, art, and generally what she likes to do for fun, all of which are very queer. We often go out to a lot of events together. We hung out at our city's Pride Festival and see each other a couple times a month for drinks or for generally hanging out. I wanted to be someone she could celebrate herself and her identity with, and I think I accomplished that. The problem is, I think the identity dominates our friendship now. When we hang out, Kara will insist on listening to her kind of music, lots of indie rock, queer artists, and sapphic bands. A lot of which I don't really vibe with, but I never say no and I don't complain when she does. However, when I play my type of music, like dad rock, rap, and Afro soul, R&B, she may listen to one or two songs before changing to her music again because she claims she wants to show me a new artist or song. I let her vent to me about her frustrations with work and her struggles in her romantic life. I even sat with her and let her cry on my shoulder when she broke up with her most recent partner, spending 2 hours consoling her. However, when I try to speak to her about my frustrations, she seems to get this glassy look in her eyes and she'll murmur a few affirmations before changing the topics to her experiences because it reminds her of something that she went through. These are a few of the many one sided experiences I've had with Kara. I know she's a good person and I know it's unfair, but I've started to resent her and her queerness. As someone who's recently discovered and accepted my own bi/slash pansexuality, I understand how important someone's identity is to them, and I would never want to be someone who makes others shrink themselves to make myself feel seen or heard. but I've caught myself thinking things like, enough with the trans talk, or another lesbian indie band recently. I really hate that I feel this way. I don't want to hate who my friend is or despise the things that she likes or believes in and relates to. How can I tell her this without her thinking I'm a giant transphobe and shunning her identity? How can I fix this? What do you think, Nikki?
Oh my gosh, I have so many thoughts. Okay, well, I'm glad that they answered the question around their orientation because I was just curious for my own contextualization. They said they were 27 male. Am I correct in that at the onset of it?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Um, I was just kind of curious about the comfort level with queerness overall. Obviously, they were open to having friendship and all of that, so it may or may not be relevant, but I was just curious. Okay, so I think one of the beautiful things about Reddit at large, and this exemplifies it very well, is people's willingness to be incredibly open. It's
Mm-hmm.
profound. For anybody who is not a Reddit person, and you don't have to be, listen, like take it or leave it. But I feel like for a really long time, I sort of saw Reddit as like a little bit of like a dumpster of the web, like what's happening over here. I don't like what's going on. And then I was like, oh no, the amount of subreddits on relationship advice, friendship, just sort of humanity at large. There's this really beautiful light side that's extremely community oriented and not sort of like the dark corners of the web that I perceived it to be originally. I'm sure that also
Yeah.
exists. I'm just not hanging out there. So I think this is a really good representation of somebody who is in a situation that is uncomfortable to acknowledge and also is trying to handle the circumstances with a lot of respect for the person that they care about. When you don't have other people that you can go to ask for this advice in your day-to-day life, I do actually feel like Reddit is an amazing place for that. You may or may not get the answers you're hoping to get, but I think that what I hear from this person is a lot of empathy, a lot of understanding, and a desire to have maybe more equality in the friendship. And it's coming out a bit as, they're concerned that they're going to come off as transphobic, which, to be honest with you, I don't think that it comes off that way at all based on how they've messaged about it. I think it sounds like you are like this person is somebody who is having trouble making their voice heard in the friendship, and at the risk of feeling like they're squashing the other person's identity is not actually expressing their own needs. So it's actually creating more friction. It doesn't seem like this person has directly approached their friend about this. It sounds like they may have tried to sort of hint at things or insert, their music here, but then the other person switches it over. This is a really good example of sort of somebody who's going to do the thing that they want to do and somebody who's going to try to do the thing they want to do, but if somebody says no, that's fine, and it's not a bad thing. It's just that it's I don't want to say passive aggressive because it's not aggressive. I think it's passive. You're trying to communicate something to somebody without actually saying it. And so if they aren't inherently able to read that from you, your assumption is potentially that they don't care or they're flat out ignoring that need of yours. So this is, in my mind and from what you shared, this is a great opportunity for this person to actually say the thing. You should be talking to your friend about this. Now, if you're worried about how they're going to feel, if they're going to feel like it's transphobic, I actually think one of the best ways to have hard conversations is to kind of give the disclaimer, whether that's upfront or throughout the conversation at various points, to say, this is coming from a place of love. I value our relationship. I care about you. I care about our connection. I also feel like, because of, I'm coming off the cuff here, so bear with me, but it's like, I'm really glad that you've been able to transition and feel such a strong sense of identity for yourself. This is also something that I'm navigating with my own identity. And so I want there to be space for the things that I care about too. If it's stuff that you don't necessarily enjoy or you don't prefer, we don't have to do those things together. But I do, make space for those things that are important to you, even if they're not necessarily my preference. So I think part of it is just opening the dialogue around that and seeing where it goes. Because, like you said earlier, it's so subjective. So I don't want to sit here and act like I know exactly what to say. 100% this is how you approach it. But I think you have to nurture the conversation once you put it out there, and sort of as you're in that dynamic, establish what are the things that I can say and I feel they might be receptive to, versus what are the things that I might want to say, but maybe now's not the time, or I need to give them the opportunity to respond so it doesn't just turn into a fight. And in my experience, I think one of the biggest pieces of having hard conversations like this is upfront saying, like, I don't intend to, nor do I want this to create a fight, but I want to express
Mm.
something to you that has been on my mind, or something that has been frustrating me or hurting me or making me feel XYZ type of way. Because I think that if you sort of pitch, so to speak, the conversation in that way, it prepares somebody for a conversation that might be uncomfortable, but it's letting them know that, like, your intention is coming from a place of a desire to maintain that connection, or at least understand each other in a more comprehensive way.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I think to this is a whole other conversation. But I think what's happening for this person is it's one because they respect and care about their friends' feelings. And let's replace like this trans identity with anything else. Like this could be somebody going through a ton of grief right now. This could be somebody going through a cancer, really tough illness, and it's like, yeah, that is huge and that deserves respect and attention, and I want to give that to them, right? Like we insert anything else, like person's going
You're
through a
totally
breakup,
right.
and there would probably be a little bit less hesitancy to have that kind of conversation, my guess. I find that sometimes what happens is when it comes around certain topics, especially, and this is coming from a straight cis white woman, petite white woman, so obviously take this with a grain of salt, but one thing that I have found is that oftentimes, and I've been guilty of doing this to the men in my life, honestly, like the white cis straight men in my life, where I almost like project like a certain level of perfectionism onto them for how they should, if you will, like culturally handle things. And that I don't think is the goal either. I think we need to be mindful of that. I think this is where a lot of issues come about, like where cancel culture and like a whole other
Yeah.
conversation can begin about, you know, policing each other and things with that regard. But I think this friend is not the kind of person, at least as we read in that story, where they are disrespecting this person's identity and what they are going through in any way. They're just getting frustrated with not feeling seen and heard. And in any other friendship, I think a disclaimer would be there of, hey, I want to celebrate you, or I do think this is important. Your problems are important to me, and hearing you is important to me. And I also want to be heard as
Yeah.
well. And I haven't really been feeling that way, and so I wanted to bring this to your attention. And I think this goes uh, back to our previous conversation about how conversations are two people mutually agreeing to understand each other and to collaborate in that endeavor. And I
Um,
think maybe this is the line for if somebody is willing to collaborate with you or not,
yeah, that's
right?
what I was gonna say. And I think, to your point, it's like something that my wife and I talk about a lot is that you can't be responsible for how somebody else responds either. And I can say with confidence, I've absolutely done this, and she has as well. She's done it with me, and I've had to call it out, right? Is not saying what you need to say because you're worried about how the other person is going to respond is not fair to that other person either, because they don't
Mm,
know what you're thinking if you haven't told them. They might
right.
assume or feel like something's off, but they're never going to know exactly what you feel until you communicate it. And if you're hesitating in anticipation of somebody's potential response, because you don't know for a fact that what it's going to be, then you're sort of doing both of you a disservice. And you're not really giving that person a chance to show up for themselves. You're
Yeah.
like I felt that in conversations with people in my life where it's like family is a great example of this. So I'm the youngest child. Growing up, I was far more reactive, and it was years of me having to, get to a place where I could say to my family, I get that that's what you think about who I am, but that's not who I am now. That's who I was. That's
Mm.
how I was when I was younger, right? And so we can lay out a lot of assumptions for other people because we want to believe that we know, but the truth of the matter is that we don't. And so if you do not feel like your needs are being met in a relationship, or if somebody's not understanding your perspective, then help them understand that.
Love that. I truly couldn't have said it better myself. So with this person, the post blew up, and uh, so this is not really like an update. It's a little bit more of an edit, but I think it's satisfying, right? We want to know what happens.
Yeah,
So
totally.
this person said that they are going to do what a lot of people are recommending and speak to her about how they've been feeling. This person says, I've realized my problem was never about her gender identity, queerness, or lifestyle. In fact, even though I don't vibe with a lot of her music, I've discovered some artists and songs that I really enjoy thanks to Kara. And her sharing her experiences has genuinely helped me broaden my mind and thought processes about the world. I don't want her to stop sharing those things with me. My problem was feeling like my interests and emotions weren't heard or seen as much as hers, but it's not Kara's responsibility to sense that and to voice my feelings for me. We'll be hanging out over the weekend, so I'm going to try to bring it up and hopefully it goes well. So I
I
think
love
that
that.
is
I
a
just got
happy ending.
goosebumps. I got goosebumps as you were reading that because I was thinking, yes, exactly. Like it's so fulfilling to witness people come to those moments of realization. And
Mhm.
I feel like what I hope when they have that conversation that they were able to say to their friend the thing that they said there, that this is what it is. I didn't feel like it mattered, and I want to feel like it matters, and also
Right.
I do value the things that you share. So please don't stop sharing with me, but please also consider that maybe there needs to be a little bit more space for me.
Yes, so well said. And yeah, I love it too. So we have a couple more that I want to make sure I
This
read
is
to
so fun. I
y'all.
love it.
So so this one's a long one. It's coming from Am I the Asshole? And it says, Am I the asshole? Blah, blah, blah. Am I the asshole for the way I reacted to my friend's pregnancy? I am a 22-year-old university student, and almost all my friends are 18 to 25-year-olds slash recent graduates who all are living in my uni town. Almost all of my friends are LGBTQ plus in a queer relationship, so there's rarely a pregnancy scare in my friend group, but when there is, it's always a negative thing. One of my closest friends from my hometown is a 31-year-old who is a heterosexual woman. In the 10 years we've been friends, she has never had a serious long term relationship, just series of situationships and one night stands. She is financially stable and supports herself and is not a student, but she always has said that she never wants kids and never wants to settle down. I stayed in my uni town over the summer, and when I finished my master's, I haven't seen her in a while, but we talk every day, and she never said anything about getting into a relationship. 2 weeks ago, we didn't talk for 3 days, and I was getting worried about her. And then she texted me randomly at 3 a.m., I'm pregnant, dot, dot, dot. So I responded, oh shit, are we happy or sad about this? Who's the father? Because I didn't want to celebrate too soon, as everything I've known about her makes me think she wouldn't be happy about this. She didn't respond, but over 24 hours later, she called me to chew me out over the phone, telling me why I couldn't just be happy for her and that it's really rude and disrespectful to ask the questions that I did. I told her that none of my friends would be happy about this, and she's always spoken about how she didn't want kids. So I wanted to make sure I wasn't reacting, or I wanted to make sure I was reacting properly and didn't sound too positive. Oh, and she didn't sound too positive in her message.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. um, it basically goes on to say that she hung up on me and we haven't spoken since. She's ignored all my texts and calls. So am I the asshole? I'm worried I've lost a close friend over this. We've never fought like this before, but also I don't know if what I said was so wrong. So I just want to get an outside opinion.
Okay. All right. All right. Let's do this. Okay. So it's important context. My wife and I are decidedly child free by choice. So I can empathize with where this person is coming from in terms of the how should I respond to this. My friends who are trying for children or have become pregnant and seem happy about it, I'm happy for them. It is not the choice I would make for myself. I learned recently that a friend in the group that we have was not thrilled about child free content that my wife and I made, even though we were just riffing on like why we didn't want to be parents. And I was like, okay, I mean, I guess some people are really more sensitive to this. To me, um, I think that this person's response actually was pretty, I don't know if appropriate is the right word, but I think it was okay. I think it was acceptable.
Yeah.
Like, are we happy? Are we upset? Maybe I wouldn't have tossed the who's the father in there right away, but I probably would have asked, like, how are you feeling about it? Maybe that would have been a better way to pose the question. You know, how are you feeling about that? Or maybe that's big news. How do you feel about that? Right. Because you're acknowledging the grandeur of the circumstance and also not really trying to say you should feel one way about it, or I as the person learning this information feel any type of way about it just yet. I'm pregnant indicates absolutely nothing to you, absolutely nothing other than the fact that this person is pregnant. So I think it seems pretty unreasonable to be chewed out about something like this. It's, to
Mm-hmm.
me, I feel like it might be a little disarming to feel like you have to defend yourself for asking the questions that way. And honestly, this is one of those situations, and maybe it's because I'm like almost 39 and I'm just thinking about like, okay, well, that's her choice. She can be mad about it. Sorry that you were offended by what I said. I don't see that as anything that was offensive or unreasonable in that regard. So, however that upset you, I'm sorry. Also, though, there was nothing in any conversations maybe we've had previously, or there was no indication that this was something you were really wanting. So I didn't really know how to respond. I think you could easily explain your side of it and have somebody who is in a reasonable emotional space accept that and maybe realize that they might have been a little quick to react to it. But at the same point in time, if this person is that quick, not just to have the response that they had, but to isolate and cut somebody off from it, it actually feels like you're it feels a little manipulative, to be honest, on the end of the person who's getting very defensive about it. If you genuinely don't want to be friends with the person because they asked you those questions and didn't immediately celebrate with you, despite having no indication that that's the place that you were in, you've got some work to do. Like, I don't know that I have any sage advice here other than it just feels like a really immature response to something that was relatively neutral. And my one other thing would be like the question of if this wasn't something that she communicated that she wanted, but now it's happening and maybe she does want it, maybe not. I don't mean want it, meaning the baby. I mean, like, this is the direction she wants her life to go. Um, if
Mm-hmm.
that is the case, great. Maybe that friendship dissolves. But on the other hand, there is this part of me that thinks, what if that's not the life that she wants, but she's trying to convince herself? And the best way to do that is to not have people from your circle who know that that wasn't what you wanted around you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I do, because this person mentions, and I did not read through this one, I just skimmed it. I I think that this story too isn't really, because it was almost like in the beginning they were like, well, because my friends in my circle is normally like queer, like I didn't think about it this way. But also I think I'd have like a very similar response. I actually think I have done this before, where a friend has been like, hey, I'm pregnant, and I've been like, how do we feel?
Yeah.
Okay. And so, right, because it is such a a personal to that person in their time thing.
And,
But I
and if
also agree
somebody,
with you. I oh, go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, and if somebody has not indicated to you if it is like a positive thing to them, um, you don't want to assume that it's not. Say something that then makes them feel discouraged to share that with you. So I think that person hedged their bets in the best way they could. Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt.
Yeah, honestly. No, you're good. I agree completely. And I'm curious about this other person in particular. Like, is this normal behavior for them to just like get really bad about something and not? Because I would then maybe, and it's not your burden, but like if this is out of character for this person, if this were my friend, I think I would be like, are you okay?
Yeah,
Like,
100%.
do you want to talk about something? And I think there's sometimes barriers to that where we think, oh, but I shouldn't be the one, like she was the one that reacted, right? But I think giving each other some grace, like when somebody does something that really is out of character, uh we all, as much as we had like such a beautiful conversation about meaningful connection and repair and conversations and connective conversations, and I think that's really good to have, we're all still human with imperfections, with projections. Like you just said, this person might be like, well, I don't want to be around anybody that knows I didn't want this before. That it's so not personal. And so one, to not take this personally, I mean, especially there is a really big age gap between these two. She said that, or they said that they are 22. So I think,
Well, there's also
that's
like
an
an
age where,
emotional maturity dynamic that you would potentially expect in the reverse for that response to be happening. But I think the person
mm-hmm,
who's older having this seemingly disproportionate response kind of says a lot about where they are on their emotional journey.
are, I
And like there's some
agree. I
work to be done
agree.
there.
I agree. I mean, period. But if this were me and this were my friend, I think that is something that I would want to do. It depends on this person's like behavior in the past relationship, because I think being that close, that's something to uh be willing to collaborate on before being
Totally.
like, okay, no. So I have one more for you that I because I know you got to go. And this one is uh intense friendship in queer girls is what the title is, and it's from r
Okay.
slash lesbians, actual lesbians. And it says, what do you think about it and what are your experiences? And this person says, friendships can be painfully confusing. I absolutely love my best friend. We seem to be on a whole different level of friendship than I've ever been, and that is scary. Our feelings towards each other are not romantic, but do seem to go deeper than friendship, and I would love to hear your experiences on this. And somebody asks, is your best friend queer too? And she says yes. um so I'm just
Uh,
curious in general, Nikki, what are your thoughts?
Oh man. Oh goodness. Okay. There are so many things running through my head right now. Okay, so I think being a lesbian and having female friends is, especially as you're sort of coming into your queerness, can be really challenging. Not in a way, let me think about how to phrase this. So I came out when I was like 18. I would say, honestly, at the time, I probably would have qualified more as bisexual just because options were limited and I was in college and I was like, sometimes you just want to make out with somebody, you know? I just wasn't really being true to myself. But I think that, over the years, we talked about this a little bit before we were recording, how my wife and I have discussed how in our experiences, we've sort of seen that you kind of have straight friended gay people and gay friended gay people, to oversimplify it. It's obviously not conclusive and it's a very broad stroke statement, but I say this like we grew up masking as straight, basically, kind of growing up in the heteronormative society. And I've known since I was about 9 that I was gay, but I was very much closeted, and there's plenty of stories surrounding that. But I always felt like really deep, intimate, emotional connections with girls in my life. I definitely can identify when I was younger that some of those were crushes, even as an adult. When I was really unhappy in my marriage, I'm not somebody who would have cheated. But I would feel really, really strong connections with some of my friends. One who is one of my absolute best friends, And it's like when I met my wife, it was like she's the combination of like my best friends in somebody who's a lesbian who finds me attractive. It was perfect. It worked out great. There were no questions, right? But if you have a
Mhm.
friend who is like one of your soul family people, and you're like, it's not just like, oh, we're friends, we hang out, whatever, but I feel like a deep, deep bond with you, it's a little unsettling because it's not that you're thinking about crossing this line into something that's beyond the friendship, but it does hit deeper. And if you think about, if you're somebody who's listening, and Jewel, I'm curious if you sort of have this experience in your own life too, is like you have some people who are your chosen family, right? Like the people that are, you're like, you are my people. I would do anything for you. I might even consider you closer family than my actual family. I have a friend who's like that. And when I was in my last relationship and I was super unhappy, I felt really guilty about spending time with this person because I felt like it was an attraction and I would feel so guilty about it, even though she's straight. There's never been any indication that it would be more than that. But I was deeply unsettled in my life in other areas. And so I really clung to this relationship in a way that felt, um, closer than a standard friend. And I say all of this because I think when you are, as you said earlier, like women have these more deep, intimate, sort of connective friendships in a lot of ways, that the line can feel blurred really easily. And even with friends that I had that like I grew up with, we both came out in college, ended up finding out we were living together for a bit. It was like we were never attracted to each other, but you contemplate a little bit. You're like, could it work with them? Because I mean, they're queer and we're really good friends and maybe, but you're also a little bit, I think, in those moments kind of trying to shove the square peg in the round hole because you're like a little bit of a scarcity mindset when it comes to lesbians. You're like, there
Yeah.
might be a lot more people that are out now and open about it, but like, where are they? Where are the ones that meet you where you're at? And so you sort of start to be like, well, maybe I'm not as attracted to them in this way, but there's all these other things about them that I love. They're one of my best friends. And I almost feel like it's when you're in that state of negotiating, being like, we're not attracted to each other, but like it could be an option, I guess. I feel like you kind of have to like free flow with the friendship. And if it's going to be something, it'll be something. And if it's not, like just acknowledge maybe they're super cool. Maybe they're also attractive, but you're not attracted to each other. All of those things are okay. And I think really normal. It's just a matter of like you both identifying that there's a boundary there. Sometimes that's very unspoken. And other times I think you maybe you hook up, maybe you kiss, maybe something happens and you're like, yeah, that's not the thing that we're doing here, right? But I think that there needs to be an acknowledgement sort of from both people in that regard where it's like, I'm not feeling anything here, but we are close and there is an intimacy there. And with my wife, it's actually interesting because we became friends first, and this was all virtual, so there is also a little bit of actual disconnect there that we weren't sure how it was going to play out when we met in person. But it was like I was telling one of my closest friends back home, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like the first lesbian that I've met where I feel like I finally have a lesbian friend and I don't have to worry about all like the sexual tension and da 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 da. And I mean, yes, now I have moved to Canada and we are happily married, but it wasn't starting out that way. And so I think that part of it is to just, instead of trying to assess and establish what it is because you need that, let it just be what it is and become whatever it will be or remain what it is and be happy with that. Like, I don't know that we have to figure it out the way that we feel like we do, but I understand sort of that little bit of that prying feeling because it is more intimate than a friendship you would have with a woman maybe who isn't queer or isn't as close to you, even if she is queer. It's like there's sort of the segmentation of friends that we have, and if somebody's very close to you, I could even feel that with like a male friend that I feel close to as a queer woman. Like I have male friends that I'm like, they're like a brother to me. And so sometimes it's like, is that person just really family to you and that's the intimacy that you're feeling? That might be it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I appreciate so much of what you said, and I can only come at this from the lens of my experiences, right? But I have really close guy friends that I'm giggling because this is the second time this has happened, but one of them edits my podcast and he's my ex-boyfriend from high school. So anyway, but really close friends, truly. But what's coming to mind is I I've just I think how do I want to say this? I think this is so interesting, and I would love to have you come back to talk more about these stories and do some more stories if you'd want, because
I would literally do this all day with you.
the only thing that I can really relate to with this experience is my friendships with guys, and there's been some guys that I'm really close with that I dated with years and years ago, but I think why we're able to be like family now, truly, because I mean, like years and years and years ago, like our breakup anniversary is our 10th breakup anniversary is coming up. So, and like I'm, close to their partners. I, but I do think on some level there are some like social scripts for how to be friends with a guy as a straight woman and how for it's okay, what's acceptable, not. And really, I don't think there's a lot of social scripts out here when it comes to right queer friendships in that way. So it's really interesting to me for you to say that, and I can imagine for a lot of people it being really confusing. And I think you brought up so many points that I think everybody could just like sit with and just embody and take home with them. But I think a through line that I hear in your explanation, in your response, is like you really have to like just like tap in to yourself and to figure out like what the difference is and just allow that friendship to be. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that is important to acknowledge is because I'm somebody who is prone to anxiety, I would really hold on to that and feel a lot of like discomfort, like I was doing something wrong by thinking about it. And sorry, my dog's like moving around. Like I was, you can edit that out, Nick. I would feel like I was doing something wrong because I was contemplating it. And it's like, even when, and so when I was in this last relationship that was very unhealthy, like I said, I wasn't cheating, I wasn't contemplating cheating, but I was craving connection that I wasn't getting in that relationship. I was in it for like 10 years and I was extremely just like not who, in retrospect, it's like that was very clearly the wrong person for me. So, of course, I was like trying to channel this connection that I desired through other relationships that I had. And so I think part of it is allowing yourself to explore your feelings without feeling guilt or shame about the fact that you're trying to understand them. And I wish that I had the self-awareness and the compassion for myself in those moments when I was struggling with it, because I felt like I was being dishonest or dishonorable because I was trying to figure out what those feelings were. And in reality, it's like those are your private feelings. Whether you choose to express those to somebody else, it's up to you. But you're not doing anything wrong by contemplating it or trying to assess for yourself what that means, because especially if you're in a relationship, I think this is important to acknowledge. If you're in a relationship and you find yourself sort of drifting to the place of, well, is this more than friendship? You might want to ask yourself about, is there something missing from your relationship that you're trying to fulfill elsewhere? And not that you're intentionally doing that, but you're craving something that you're not getting. And what does that mean? And is there a way to build that in the relationship that you have? Is the relationship that you have healthy anyway? And if not, then I think it's having the hard realization with yourself and maybe ultimately the decision to disconnect from the current relationship, not even to pursue somebody else, but just to recognize within yourself that you need something different than what you have. And that could pertain to friendships as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. Nikki, I appreciate you so much for coming on the
Same.
podcast, for sharing your heart, for sharing your responses. I just appreciate you so much as a person, and I appreciate all of the wisdom that you shared. Where can everybody go learn more about what you're doing in the world? Because I know you have a really awesome big project coming up.
Yes. So my wife Nicole and I are on TikTok and Instagram at Nick and Nick. We'll put that in the show notes because spelling and underscores matter. And the website stuff is sort of in flux right now for that project. So in the meantime, if you enjoyed this conversation and you like my vibe, I definitely recommend what Jules said. Check out the episode we recorded together on my podcast, Can I Just Say? And yeah, I mean, any other episodes you'd like to listen to, please do. There are a lot of really amazing conversations with beautiful humans who have, gone on their own journeys and were really vulnerable in sharing their experiences and how they grew. And if you're somebody who really is trying to figure out who you are, where you belong, what feels right to you, those conversations helped me navigate that journey myself, and I'm sure they can help you.
Beautiful. Yes, everybody go check it out. And thank you all for popping in and hanging out with us today, and we will see you next time.
Thank you so much, Jewel.
Thanks for joining me on the Socially Delightful podcast. I'm Jewel, and I'm truly so grateful that you came and hung out with me today. If this podcast meant something to you, it would mean so much to me if you left me a review so that way I could keep making content that you love. And if you really want to make my whole day, share this podcast to your Instagram story and tag me at Connection with Jewel so I can shout you out. Or send me a message and let me know what resonated with you or what you want to hear next. And I'll see you at the next episode.